Let's start with a word of prayer, and then we'll jump into our Hebraisms tonight. Father, thank you, Lord, for this opportunity to get together and study, and we just pray that the Holy Spirit would illuminate us to your word so we can understand it and apply it to our lives. And, Father, as we look at these things, give us insight, give us wisdom, and help us to be obedient to it. We pray in Jesus' name, amen. Okay, the first Hebraism I want to tackle tonight then, we'll hit several of them, is, did not your fathers do thus, and did not our God bring all this calamity on us? And that's in Nehemiah 13:18, referring to the Babylonian exile that they had just went through. The issue then becomes, it's a principle of what we call collective guilt. And it's not like the wokeism collective guilt to where you and I are guilty for something that happened 250 years ago. But it's a collective guilt if the generations keep repeating the same sin over and over again. And you know, what their fathers had did is obviously in context had ignored the Sabbath, especially the Sabbath years. And there was a total of, I think, every Jubilee, every seventh year, you had to give a Sabbath rest for the land. And it ended up costing Israel 70 years, because that's how many years they had missed of not keeping a Sabbath year. So it ended up being a total of 490 years, and then 70 years out of that. So that's why the Babylonian exile was 70. So with the exile, this is what their fathers had did. This is what their ancestors did. They had repeatedly for 490 years not kept the seventh Sabbath year where you're supposed to give the land rest. So God forced them off for 70 years to give the land rest. And so the idea is when they come back is we cannot keep doing the same thing. Otherwise, it'll happen to us as a generation. And so what you're looking at is historical patterns. And what you're looking at, too, is going back even to the other idiom, if I visit the sins in the third and fourth generation, it's that kind of concept where proclivities, certain sins are passed on as normalized. And so that additional generation that takes it, the younger generation that takes it up, gets penalized for the same thing. So it's not that God is penalizing the younger generation for the older generation. It's that they keep repeating the same thing that's getting passed on generationally. And that's what the passage in Nehemiah means. And the idea then, it comes to a very, very applicable thing for all of us. And I deal with this a lot in counseling is, you know, you have to be the first person in your family to break the cycle of what's going on in your family. Like I've mentioned before, we have good things that our families pass on to us. Sometimes they're very godly things. But then you look in our families, and a lot of times there's bad stuff that's being passed through. There's idols that are being passed through. There's ways of managing life that are passed on. And a lot of those things are destructive. A lot of those things are not correct. And look, if you don't see it, number one, if you don't identify it, you can't stop it. And a lot of people, I hate to say this, become blind to their own family. They start idolizing their parents. They idolize their family. And they put their family in a position of God rather than God being on that position. And they idolize their family, and especially their parents. And, the Bible wants you to see it wants you to see people in the proper light. It wants you to see that, yeah, there are good aspects of people and there's bad aspects of people, and you got to see both aspects. You can't just blind yourself to one. You can't just say someone's all bad or someone's all good and they have no flaws or, whatever. You can't do that. You have to see them holistically as the Bible would see them. Someone's made in the image of God, but also is a sinner. So what ends up happening a lot of times is people idolize their parents so bad because they want their parents to fit into the ideal structure of what their parents should have been. And look, I deal with a lot of people in counseling that, we're talking about people whose fathers or mothers were horrible, horrible people, horrible. and yet they idolize them. And it seems bizarre when you first encounter that, but it's the person trying to fit their parent in an image that they don't belong in, and they idolize them. I've talked to women that have been repeatedly molested for all their junior high and high school years by their father, and they still idolize their father. Now, you would think, well, that doesn't seem rational. That doesn't seem like that's insane. Yeah, I know, but when you idolize somebody, you put them in that category, and you have a wish hope that that's what they would be or could be or whatever, then you will go blind to them even molesting you. That's how bad it gets. And a lot of times, if that pattern's not broken, that person will repeat the same sins on and on and on in their lives and continue to do the same things. So, that's one of the things, is to see your family objectively and see your friendships objectively, see yourself objectively. And that's what the Bible wants you to do. It wants you to get into reality. So then when you do get into reality, and this is what Nehemiah is saying, is, look, man, we just paid the price for 70 years being stuck in Babylon because of what our ancestors did. And we're not doing this anymore. We're going to break the cycle. And that's where you have to get to in your own life, is I've got to start fresh. I got to start like an Abraham and Sarah and start this new venture in my life. And, from this point on, the junk stops and the good stuff starts. And you try to make your way through life like that. And no one's perfect, I get that. But you at least have to start. You at least have to see the cycle and in order to break it. If you're really in tune with this and you want to dive into more, what you want to look at is the book of Judges. The book of Judges continues to show a repeated cycle that gets repeated in Israel's history. And the cycle just keeps repeating and repeating and repeating. But the cycle goes downward. That's the problem. It doesn't stay at this level. It starts cycling, but it goes downward, which means every time it cycles, it gets worse. And then it cycles and gets worse. And then it cycles and gets worse. And so if you watch the pattern in the book of Judges, every generation that goes through gets worse. Well, that's the same as a family. If the cycle is not broken in a family, then it continues to get worse and worse with each generation that passes. And really, that's the blindness of it. So you'll hear the charismatics, and they use the term, generational sins, and there's some truth to that. It's not so much how the charismatics look at it, but there is generational sins that get passed on, and it's just repeating patterns. That's all it is. It's associations and patterns that the person just keeps doing, and they don't recognize it. That being the case, then in order to break it, you have to identify it, and then after you identify it, then you have to replace the pattern with the biblical pattern. So you just can't just stop doing it and not do anything. You have to replace the pattern. That's what ends up being a problem. And then the other problem is that there's a reward attached to the pattern, typically. So like in a family, I'll give you an example, the family will reward the person for acting in this family standard. If whatever the family standard is, if they do it, then they get the pat on the back, they get the approval and affirmation from mom and dad or grandma and grandpa or whoever, and that affirms that situation, and that becomes the reward. And that's what keeps them in the game. That's what keeps them doing it, because they get accepted in their family. And that's a hard pattern to break. So that's why if they won't see their family objectively, then they won't stop getting the reward from it. And the reward is like the gasoline that keeps the lie going in them. And so that has to stop. And they have to stop getting a reward for that. But you can't just leave the person, when you're counseling the person, you just can't leave the person with nothing. You have to replace it. So it's the principle of take and replace. So if I take something away that thought pattern, that behavior structure is bad, I then have to come back and replace it with the proper behavior structure and proper thinking. So it's the principle of take and replacing, and this is what we would call renewing your mind. I'm going to take something and that's wrong and replace it with that which is right and create a new thought pattern and a new neural pathway in my brain, so I can think differently. And it's sometimes hard because the minute you stop doing the family pattern, you get rejected. That's instantaneously you get rejected from your family. And that's what a lot of people don't like. They don't like the fact that their mom and dad now reject them and whatever. And some of it's pretty harsh. I was reading some case studies about this, and, a girl, her family had a line of brujas, witches in Mexico, and her whole family was in line, just witch after witch after witch after witch. And they wanted her to be a bruja, and she came to faith in the Lord, and she had wanted nothing to do with that. And so she instantly got rejected. And the bruja, her mom, started putting curses on everybody that was attached to her that trying to convert her, out of witchcraft into Christianity. So it was a lot of demonic activity and stuff like that. But the point is, she finally broke the pattern of the witchcraft, and so she got rejected. Her mom didn't want anything to do with her, and things kind of fell apart. So that's what happens. And so it could be anything, and that's pretty extreme, but that's an example of that. It could be anything. It could be workaholism. It could be the god of money. It could be the prestigious jobs. It could be credentials. It could be anything. It doesn't matter. Social structure, whatever. So anyway, that's the big issue that they're going on here. And so what Nehemiah is doing is invoking collective memory to warn people, which was Sabbath breaking that triggered the exile. And that's kind of what we're doing even today in the West, as we're watching the West continue to crumble in front of us. We're trying to warn people in our culture that if you keep going the way we're going, if we keep rolling and you keep having more Charlie Kirk's deaths and more of this rabid anti-Semitism and this rabid violence that people think that's okay, you're going to get punished at some point in time. You're gonna pay the price for living and thinking that way, and that's a collective problem. And so there is a collective guilt that's going on in the West, because if this is not confronted, if it's not stopped, and we go over the cliff, collectively, those who didn't do anything about this are going to be guilty, even though they did nothing. Those who did nothing will be partly guilty for that. Obviously, if you're the person saying something and trying to do something, then you won't share in that. But look, man, if the West goes off the cliff, you and I are still going to be indirectly affected, even though I didn't do it, even though you didn't do it, we're going to be indirectly affected. And that's the idea of collective guilt. You can't escape it. You are a product of your environment, of where you're living, and if your environment goes down the tubes, you're going down with it. And that's why I can't understand why so many people are not waking up. You are. I'm speaking to you guys, but I've been watching a lot of my news feeds and a lot of the information on X and social media. Man, it's off the chain. And just what I saw on Sunday after we talked about Charlie Kirk, dude, the majority of churches here in town, they didn't talk about it, anything. They didn't say boo. Didn't say nothing, not even a prayer. The best some of them did was like, well, we want to pray for the confusion in our times. Confusion? Hey, man, why don't you just shut up and go sell insurance? Just get out of the pulpit, because I don't know what you're here for. And you look at that and you're like, you're a loser, man. And you're a loser because you're not doing your job. You're the same guy that shut down their church for a year and took money from the government. You're the same guy that doesn't say anything about the anti-Semitism raging through our culture. You're the same guy that doesn't talk about Israel. You're the same guy that pushed the vaccine. Who are you? And so the problem is the church in general is going to pay a collective guilt price for what's happening in the West, because the church is responsible for the morality and the thought patterns that go on in our society. Now, again, God separates the righteous and the unrighteous. He separates the wheat and the chaff, and he knows how to do that. So I'm not trying to scare you or anything like that, because you're the ones that are fighting against this. You're the ones pushing the narrative of truth. But we will secondarily be affected, not in a primary way, but in a secondary way. And God will spare us whatever he needs to spare us of. But I want you to think through this. Did Daniel and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego get taken in the exile? Yes, they were not spared. So the collective guilt even went on Daniel, Shadrach, and Meshach, and Abednego. It went on them. And they were taken in exile. So much so that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and Daniel were circumcised. They were already circumcised. They were made eunuchs when they got to Babylon. So, castration. That's the word I'm looking for. They were castrated. But Daniel and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego didn't do anything. Yeah, I know. But that's what I'm talking about. This is the principle here of collective guilt, that even a guy like Daniel can be taken into the exile and castrated. Now, God used Daniel, as you know, over there, but he went into the exile. And that's kind of the point that Nehemiah is trying to make, is that we all bear the responsibility for what's going on in front of us. And, you can be Daniel and still get taken in the exile. And so that's why I'm so trying to get the word out and trying to get the information out and the truth out and try to warn people, because the way things are going, it's not good. It's not good at all. I'm hoping that a lot of people will rally around, what they saw with Charlie and step up to the plate, and maybe that will happen. I hope, and I think some people are doing it. But look, man, when you look on Sunday morning on the churches here in town and they didn't do anything, I can tell you that. I can tell you already where it's going on that. Anyway, so it talks about corporate solidarity, reinforces the principle from Deuteronomy, covenant blessings and curses fall on a nation as a whole. On a personal level, on the application, this Hebraism is trying to tell you that again, it's the old line, you're doomed to repeat things if you forget history. That's the idea. That's the mention. We all know that saying, that if you don't know history, you're doomed to repeat it. Well, yeah, that's the problem. And then obviously 1 Corinthians 10, Paul always says, when you look at Israel, don't look at it and then shame them. You're to look at Israel and say, yeah, that's me personally. You're to self-apply what they do corporately and collectively. You're to apply it to yourself and saying, yeah, I can do the same thing, or the church can do the same thing, or the society can do the same thing. And that's the thing coming from that. Okay, let's go to the next Hebraism. And this comes from Job 1:7 and 2:2. And it's in regards to Satan. And obviously Satan has the ability to come before God. Satan cannot go into the New Jerusalem, but he can go into the third abode where God is. He can go before the throne and speak to God, and he does. And so in this situation with Job, if you read it, Satan gets an audience with God, and God asks him, where have you come from? What are you doing? And Satan's response is from going to and fro on the earth and from walking back and forth on it. And that's a Hebraism, obviously. And it's the idea of not just wandering around aimlessly. It is describing a constant movement of Satan, and it's intentional surveillance is the idea. It's a military term of patrolling. And so when he asks him what he'd been doing, he's basically saying, I have been patrolling and doing surveillance on the people of earth. And he's going about all the earth to observe. And what is he observing? He's looking for ways to further his agenda. He's looking for ways to influence leaders, influence key people in positions to get his agenda across. And he's looking to devour people. And I think I've mentioned this before, when it says, like in 1 Peter, that he's like a roaring lion seeking whom he may devour. What he's doing is seeking to, obviously, we're believers, is take away your influence. He cannot touch your salvation. He can't kill you. But what he can do is devour your influence and destroy your reputation, destroy your character, destroy everything you have, so that you can't make a difference in this world. And he can do that through a number of things. He can do that through sin. He can do that through fatigue. He can do that through health. He can do anything he wants. He can bring destruction upon you and see if that will take everything away from you. And that's the idea. So, and again, you're probably, when you look at that, Peter is not referring that Satan's probably going to go one-on-one with you. He's just going to use one of his minions on you. He is probably busy with world leaders and going behind the George Soroses of the world and dealing with these guys that are billionaires and influencing them. He's not going to spend his time on someone like you or me, but who he will send is someone of his minions, lower ranked, either fallen angel or demon, to harass you personally, and they're assigned to you. And so what they're doing is observing the same thing. So roaming to and forth on the earth is another term for satanic activity. Okay, and of course, satanic activity is surveillance. What are these people doing? How can we tempt them? How can we take them down? And how can we take away their influence? So you're being monitored. It's a military term. And so he's monitoring, and we don't know how many of them there are. If there are guardian angels and at least 2 are assigned to each person, you're talking at least the angels are in the billions and billions and billions and billions of those. So a third of them fell. So you're still probably talking billions or whatever. And then of course you got the demons. So they're assigned to you, and they're walking to and fro what they can do to take away your influence. That's the idea of spiritual warfare. And so he's seeking opportunities to take advantage of you. He's seeking ways to hinder you. And I say he, I'm talking about the familiar spirits with you, of what can they do to stop you from what you're doing. That's it, And one of the things is to make you too busy to serve. That's one of the things. The other thing is to make you so fatigued that you won't do anything. And that means that you're living with no margin. When you're so fatigued that you don't have time to do anything, that means that he's got you. And so we use a term busianity rather than Christianity. And someone's that busy that they don't have time for doing anything. You've been trapped. You've been trapped. You don't realize it. Like tomorrow, I'm talking at Iron Sharpens Iron, and one of the points I'm making is that if your life doesn't have any margin for good works, which have been prepared beforehand by God to do these good works, if your life doesn't have the ability to do those good works, there's something wrong with your life. There's something wrong with the way you're structuring your life. You don't have any margin. So he'll do that. Of course, he can make you sin. He can tempt you. But really, if he can't get that, he'll just make you busy, tired, or then he starts affecting your health. And sometimes, our health is just a symptom of the fall, and probably most likely it is. But sometimes our health is directly tied to oppression, and he can do that. And if it is oppression, then if you pray and seek help and seek counsel and seek prayers from the pastors or whatever, that can break that eventually. And then something just lifts and it just goes away. That's not, the majority. It's usually the rarity. But it is an issue because when we looked at Job, when you saw that passage, what does he do? He inflicts physical harm on Job. He does that. He can do that, and they can do that. They know exactly how we're made, and all they have to have is permission, and they can touch our bodies. They can't kill us, but if God allows them to touch our body, then they can, and they know how to push buttons. So that can happen. It's not all the time, but it's true. It does happen. But prayer is your answer for that, because you hear these case studies, and I've seen many case studies where people go to the doctor and the doctor can't figure out why they're having pain. The doctor can't figure out that, and eventually the doctor starts thinking that the person's making it up. And when they can't figure out where the pain's coming from or why the pain's happening, it's like a clean bill of health, and yet the person's saying, I'm in excruciating pain. It's sometimes spiritual. Again, so that you don't want to just think everything that happens is that. But again, you have to put that in part of the equation. Let's see. Application. It's a warning that spiritual warfare is constant. He never sleeps. And so therefore you have to be vigilant all the time, obviously. And so this is going on. Let's continue in Job. And this is where his wife, after Satan attacks him, and he's full of sores, and he's lost his family, he's lost everything, and he's lost his health because Satan has attacked his body. His wife says, curse God and die. And it's not really an encouraging thing for her to say. There's something wrong with her, apparently, spiritually, for her to say that. I don't know, what kind of couple would say that, but she does. And really, literally, the word means bless God and die. And it's a negative. But what happens is in the Hebrew speech, barak means bless, and they will sometimes substitute that in for curse to avoid saying curse God. And so in this case, they're using the word bless, but it means curse God and die. What she's meaning is she's not saying to disbelieve God. That's not the issue here. She's wanting to turn away from God and just get out of relationship with him, get out of fellowship with him. Well, like we say, if you're a believer, you can never lose your salvation. So this is not a salvation passage. She's not saying that. She's actually telling him to apostatize is what she's telling him. And apostasy is walking away from the faith. It doesn't mean the person doesn't believe in God. It doesn't mean they're not saved. It just means that they're giving up on their faith and accepting the despair and the death. And that's what a lot of people do. They walk away from their faith and they give in to despair. Despair is the biblical name for depression. And I'm not saying that all depression is just simply despair, because depression can be clinical, no doubt about that. But many people actually cause themselves despair because they don't focus in on the right things. They focus in on the negative, and they're highly neurotic. And if a person's highly neurotic, they always think in negative terms. And look, man, if you're highly neurotic and you're living this life, and especially the older you get, things get worse, you have a lot of people who will just walk away from the faith. And it starts with them not going to church or Bible study, whatever, and they just kind of drift out. It doesn't mean they lose their salvation. It just means they're walking away. They're not in fellowship anymore. That's what she's saying. That's what she's saying. She's saying, look, you know what? It doesn't pay to serve God. If this is the way it all goes and we lose everything, you've lost your health, and this is what it means, then there's no point in serving him. Let's just walk away. That's the idea. And so, in essence, she sees no purpose in being loyal to God anymore. And I get that. I mean, if you talk to people who have been through a lot of tragedy, and they haven't embraced it properly, they're not suffering well, um, they're very mad at God. They're very mad at God for the way things have went. And again, they're framing everything wrong. They're not seeing things properly. But this is the number one way people walk away from God and apostatize. It's not theology. It's not a theological decision. It's a suffering decision typically. And they just cannot believe that God allowed them to go through this, or that someone died, or someone was taken away from them, they lost their job. They cannot believe God would allow that. And even though you tell them, hey, it's about free will, and this is why we live in this world because of free will, it doesn't help them. It doesn't help them because they intently believe that God should intervene and stop free will. Well, if you're thinking like that in those terms, which is not in reality, and you think that God should stop anyone that pulls a gun and turns the bullets into bubbles, or stops any theft, or anything like that, then that reality doesn't work, because then that would mean God would infringe on the free will of even the perpetrators, and he doesn't do that. He doesn't do that. That's just not the way our world is designed. It can't be and allow free will if God is intervening all the time in the affairs of men. And again, I'm not saying he's a deist or anything like that God doesn't get into the affairs of men, but there's a conservation of miracles with God, because if he intervenes too much, it starts messing with our free will, and he refuses to do that. He refuses to get involved in that. But again, you can know that intellectually, but then when something happens to you, we don't know how we're going to react, and then that's what happens. People start blaming God, and they turn into Job's wife. I understand it. I understand it. I understand where they're coming from. It's not correct thinking, but I understand the emotions. She wants him just to walk away. And instead of clinging to God, instead of having faith in him and trusting him for all that's happening, she just wants him to walk away because she's already there. She's already walked away. That's the idea. The reason she says that is because her heart's already there. So the idea then comes to the biblical principle of persevering through trials. That's it. That's the idea, is you're called to persevere through trials. Now, perseverance is not a guarantee. Perseverance is a desire of God that you would persevere to the end, but it is not a guarantee. So I don't want you to think in Calvinistic terms that only believers will persevere. Not all believers persevere. They don't always persevere to the end. Ananias and Sapphira didn't. Neither did the Corinth church, and many believers that I know didn't persevere, and they died. Doesn't mean they're not believers. They just didn't persevere. They didn't suffer well. They don't like to suffer well. And so they ran from their trials. They shrunk back. They went into a mode of avoiding pain at all costs. And there's people that live their lives like that. They avoid pain at all costs, and they avoid stress at all costs, and basically they insulate themselves from the outside world. It's a very sad life in the way they live because they're afraid of pain. And they're afraid of persevering. They don't want to push through pain. They don't want to, and that's the thing too. If you think about some of our younger kids, and it's not a knock on them, but my generation and the millennial generation is not parenting correctly. So it's those two parental generations. You ever heard of this gentle parenting? Have you heard of that? It's ungodly, okay? It's ungodly. Gentle parenting. So they don't want to discipline the child. We're going to sit down and talk to Junior at 5 years old and have a PhD conversation with Junior on why he's acting out. And, it's gentle. We're not going to spank. We're not going to discipline. If we discipline, it's just me talking. It's just stupid. And what you get is rebellion on your hands because the parents are not showing two things. As parents, you got to show two things to a child: power and authority. that you have the authority to discipline that child, and you have the power to do it too. And if you don't show those two things, authority and power, that kid's going to get away from you. And so the gentle parenting restricts the parents from using their authority and using their power, and puts the child in power. So what ends up happening is the parents in this gentle parenting create a bubble around the child to where they will not let the child feel any pain in life. And it's like I talked about a couple Sundays ago, where you have these bulldozer parents that are on the playgrounds with their kids, and they have to schedule these play dates now and stuff, and it's like, that is so foreign to me. When I grew up, we left the house in the morning, we didn't come home until the lights came on in the thing, and it's like, wow, totally different world. We have to schedule play dates, and it's just like, what? So you schedule these play dates, and so they're at the park or whatever, and the moms are over there like the teachers were on the play yard refereeing the whole playground. And so no one ever gets twisted off. No one ever gets mad. The moms are keeping everything, quote unquote, fair, whatever. And they think that's a happy day. The problem is those kids are not learning how to socially deal with other people that have different temperaments, that have different attitudes. Sometimes are bullies or whatever. Just like when you and I were on the playground, we had to figure out what kids we want to hang out with and what kids we don't. Which kids that are good at playing games. And then we had to make ourselves desirable to other kids to play with. And how did we do that? Well, the way you made yourself desirable is if we're going to play dodgeball, we play by the rules. But if I go and I don't play by the rules, then no one wants to play with me. So we learned socially, if I'm going to get along in this world, I got to play by the rules, and then if I play by the rules, people want to play with me. I become a desire for somebody that wants to hang out with me and be friends, right? And then you learn the opposite sex and how to deal with the opposite sex, and you learn those things. But there was no referees. You figured that out on your own. Well, the gentle parenting movement doesn't allow that. And so they're being carried all the way through in bubble wrap, all the way until they graduate. And then they decide to take the bubble wrap off after they graduate. And it's like fragile glass house city. They can't take anything that's hard. They can't work very long because they never had chores. They don't understand what working is. So, they got to work 2 hours at Starbucks. Oh, my gosh, it's a killer. I can't believe they're making me work 2 hours. It's just really hard, really hard. And then it's like if I have any controversy in my life, it's just like I come apart. And so here's the sad news on this. The sad news is that generation is overly medicated. Because they can't take anything, so where do they go? They go to psychotropic drugs or street drugs or whatever in order to cope with life. So you got all these kids on antidepressants, and look, I'm not saying some of them don't need them, they probably do. But a lot of them, they just have went into the psychiatry world, and they're just loaded up with medicine. So the millennials and the younger generation are becoming the most medicated psychologically we've ever seen in U.S. history because they can't cope with things. And really what it comes down to is they can't persevere. They were not taught how to work through hardness and pain and suffering and to be able to push through, right? It's that thing. And then, the kids, because they've never been disciplined, they're just totally animals when they're older. No one can control them. They just, they get it. They're an HR nightmare or their company's nightmare, right? Because it's just you try to put boundaries on them, and they come from a home that mom and dad never put boundaries on them, and so they get into the workforce, and it's like they don't understand boundaries. It's just they're impossible. Now I'm not saying that everyone's like that, but my generation parented like that, and the millennials are parenting like that, and it's created this soft, non-perseverance type of individual. But when you look in the Bible, man, these people are hardcore. They are hardcore. Our Lord is hardcore. I mean, he didn't have a place to lay his head. He's traveling all over the place. He's walking wherever they goes. Barely had anything to eat. Very tough individuals, right? Being able to persevere through things. That's what Job is illustrating to us. Man, that guy persevered all the way, and he didn't curse God. He had his whole body messed up. He's literally dying almost, and he pushes through. So anyway, it's a good reminder for all of us about perseverance. Be able to confront pain and deal with it. Skin for skin, he says to God, and this is Satan's response. Have you considered my servant Job? And so Satan responds with a Hebraism, skin for skin. Yes, all that a man has, he will give for his life. And the word skin is really the word hide, like a hide of an animal, hide of a cow or something like that. So it's hide for hide is what he's trying to say. And so what Satan is trying to say to God is, look, what I have figured out about humans is this, that they're so shallow that they'll trade anything to save their own life. That's how shallow they are. They're afraid of death. And so that's what he's trying to say. So the fact is, yeah, you've taken his kids away, you've taken his property away, but I'm telling you, if you take his health away, that's when he'll curse you. That's when he'll come after you. And so that's what the idea, what he's trying to say. And so he is basically arguing, and he makes the argument about us, that Job's piety is all about just self-interest. The only reason he likes you, God, the only reason he goes to church, so to speak, the only reason he pays you any attention is because you have a hedge around him. It's because of all the good things you've given him. That's why he likes you. That's why he follows you. But he says, look, skin for skin. Take it all away and see what he does. He will trade anything for his life. I guarantee you that. Now, obviously, Job passed the test on that, right? You know the rest of the story on that. But it is a cynical claim, and it's a claim on Job that is a claim on all humanity. And for the most part, Satan is right about the majority of humanity. Job obviously is a believer in God, and Job represents that remnant believer that will stay faithful to God despite losing everything. Okay? He's a picture of that. But where is Satan getting at? He understands the nature of humanity. He's not stupid. And he is saying, look, I've seen the nature of humanity. And the fact that I'm walking to and fro all around this earth, I see how humans are. They will do anything to save their own skin. And you know what? If Satan was referring to not Job, but Gavin Newsom, you would say, yeah, you're totally right. Absolutely, that guy would do that. Or any of the other creeps that, George Soros or whatever. You would say, yeah, you're right about George Soros. He would trade anything for his own skin. Totally, I get that. So what God is trying to show is believers, true believers that are faithful to him are different. That's what he's shown with Job. This is not a picture of all humanity. Job is a picture of remnant believers who stay faithful and persevere to the end. That's what Job represents. And that's the point God's trying to make about humanity. Narrow is the path and broad is the road, right? You know that. So let's go to one more thing and then we'll finish this up. Behemoth and Leviathan. They're not necessarily like idioms that you wouldn't understand, but they have deeper meanings. And I guess you would consider it an idiom because of what they represent. And this is obviously in Job 40 and 41. God is talking to Job about, were you at creation, when I made all these things, and then he goes to the animals, and he refers to two different creatures that God made, Behemoth and Leviathan. Look now at Behemoth, which I made along with you. He is the first of the ways of God. Only he who made him can bring near his sword. And then Leviathan, can you draw out Leviathan with a hook? No one is so fierce that he would dare stir him up. Who then is able to stand against me? He is king over all the children of pride. So what you're starting to see here with Behemoth and Leviathan, Behemoth represents this massive land animal creature that's very powerful that all humans were afraid of at the time. And also Leviathan is the sea monster, the sea creature that all humans were afraid of in the ocean. And so there's a lot of symbolism here, especially with Leviathan. So let's go through this. What behemoth grammatically means beasts, okay? And it's referring to a very colossal creature that was on the earth at that period of time. Now, most people, like Answers in Genesis, will say that's a dinosaur. Maybe it is. And Leviathan is some type of a dinosaur sea monster, and maybe it is. It's also used elsewhere for chaos and dragon imagery for Leviathan. So when you look at the idiomatic sense of behemoth and Leviathan, you have to look at it symbolically first, okay? Before we get to the literalness of it, you have to understand what the Hebrew is trying to say. In the Hebrew Near East mindset, these are symbols of untamable power and chaos. They're real, but they're symbolic of this chaos and power that no human on earth can master, is the idea. But the only one that can master Behemoth and master Leviathan is God himself. And that's the idea that's coming out of this. And so again, Behemoth is the power on the land that no man can control, and Leviathan's the power in the sea that no man can control. And so it exposes basically the limits of man's control on creatures. So it's kind of a flipping of the logic. Like I said here, if Leviathan terrifies you or Behemoth terrifies you, then reverence for God should give you the same posture because he's bigger than them. He's more powerful than them. A couple things then, mythopoetic symbols. So it goes a little bit deeper here. So just hang on with me. There's more here than meets the eye. These are literary features that symbolize chaos. And we could say that maybe Behemoth is Brachiosaurus, maybe, if we wanted to say that. We can say Leviathan is Plesiosaurus, maybe. We're not sure. They're probably dinosaurs, more than likely. It's definitely not an alligator. It's not a hippo. It's not even a elephant, because it talks about Behemoth's tail being like a log type of thing, right? So it's basically the largest forces on planet Earth that man can't control. They're chaotic, but yet they bow to God, is the idea. Okay, so therefore God's saying, trust me. When you look at Leviathan, then, Leviathan has a lot more aspects to him. Job talks about ready to arouse Leviathan, talking about possibly this sea creature. But then you go into Psalm 74, and Leviathan takes on another aspect. God breaks the heads of Leviathan. Leviathan was supposedly had 7 heads, okay? And then in Psalm 104, there goes that Leviathan which you have made to play there. So to God, Leviathan is this powerful sea creature, but it's like a toy to God, right? And then Isaiah 27 then gives it an eschatological notion. And it says the Lord will slay Leviathan, the fleeing serpent. And this is where people start connecting Leviathan to Satan. And then Job 26, God stirs the seas, pierces the fleeing serpent. And it's also called Rahab as well. So all of a sudden you start looking at the cross references and you're like, wait, this takes on a bigger idea here. In Job, contextually, we're talking about power, we're talking about chaos, but then I go outside of it, and it's talking about God breaking the heads of Leviathan, which seems reminiscent to me of Genesis 3:15, and then destroying Leviathan in the end times. So to me, it seems like a reference to Satan. So then let me go deeper, okay? So let's go then to Ugaritic sources, Canaanite sources. Let's go to Mesopotamian sources of what they thought about this creature, okay? So again, you're going into the Near East mindset to get this Hebraism out, okay? So what we have in Near Eastern mythology is that sea monsters regularly appeared as adversaries of the gods, okay? So in Canaanite texts from Ugaritic, describe Baal's victory over Lotan. who was closely related to Leviathan. It's probably the same thing, just different words, different names, and described Leviathan as this fleeing serpent and twisting serpent with 7 heads. If you go to Mesopotamian creation epic, you have Enuma Elish, who tells of Marduk's defeat of Tiamat, the chaos monster of the primordial waters. And Tiamat is probably the same as Leviathan, we're probably thinking. So it's not, these are common myths that are going on in the Near East. So these myths typically follow a pattern, and here's the pattern. Primordial chaos, represented by sea monsters, threatens cosmic order, but the storm god defeats the monster and establishes divine rule. Okay? That is the pattern. And if you look at that pattern, that is the pattern found in Genesis 1. Between Genesis 1 and 2, I told you guys this, you have all of a sudden God creating everything, and then all of a sudden in verse 2, you have chaos. You have the tohu and bohu that's going on, and they're like, wait a second, how did he create things? And all of a sudden, by verse 2, it's in complete chaos, and then out of the chaos, the tohu vavohu, he creates the order for Adam and Eve and for humans. So the Mesopotamian and Canaanite structures are the same pattern. Chaos with water, and then Leviathan is associated to the chaotic water. Then God destroys that and then creates out of that a divine order. And the divine order is found in Genesis 1. When you see the numbering of the days, that's the divine order. On this day does this, and it was good. But it comes out of the creation. The creation of our world comes out of the chaos. So I think you see the pattern. I think there's enough evidence to say, okay, these are corruptions of what they understood of creation, and obviously Moses put that in Genesis, and they are basically saying the same thing, even though it's corrupted with different names, Tiamat and Lotan. It's Satan. It was the fall of Satan that caused the chaos and the order and the darkness and the primordial waters. And again, who is Leviathan associated to? He's associated to water, which represents chaos and against divine order. And that's Leviathan, but that's also the primordial waters. It's the same thing. It's the same pattern. So the biblical authors drew on familiar mythological images, but transformed them to emphasize, obviously, what God did, and that's what Moses is using. He's using that pattern, the truth of it, and then in explaining this is what actually happened. It's the same thing with Genesis 6. If I go to Mesopotamian literature, if I go to other Near Eastern literature or wherever in the world about the divine beings coming down and creating hybrids, well, all I have to do is go to Genesis 6, and that tells me the truth of what happened there. But yet it's in all the mythologies. That's the idea. So unlike the pagan myths, which the gods struggled against chaos, the biblical writers show that God is in complete control of chaos and Leviathan from the very beginning, which would be Satan and the chaotic order, right? Therefore, Leviathan primarily represents the forces of chaos, Satan, that oppose God's ordered creation. Okay? So in ancient cosmology, the sea represented the realm of chaos and death. Well, that's true, because to the Jews, the oceans represented chaos and death and uninhabitable places. The Jews do not like water in the ancient world. You can't live there. We can't breathe there. It's not made for us. And it represents the judgments of Noah's flood. That's what water represents. And it represented many times the opening into the underworld. Because if Leviathan, that's where Leviathan is, then that's where the opening to the underworld goes. So it's, that's why the oceans are connected to Satan. Oh, by the way, where does the Antichrist come from? He will rise out of the sea. He rises out of the sea. The sea represents chaos, disorder, Leviathan, Satan, and it represents the Gentile world. So he rises out of the sea. It's not an accident. It's all connected. If you follow the pattern, right? You got to follow the pattern. So Leviathan is the Lord of the sea, embodies everything that threatens God's good creation. The symbolism then extends beyond natural force to include polemic enemies, personal trials, spiritual opposition, and all that. That's what the psalmist is speaking about. So really, Leviathan is your spiritual warfare. That's who you're fighting, is Leviathan, which is Satan. Okay, chaos, disorder. Satan is trying to bring chaos and disorder to your life. Now, when you go a little bit deeper, so just follow with me, because there's a lot here. So when you go to Jewish tradition, I want to go to early Christian tradition about Leviathan. Jewish literature expanded the biblical references to Leviathan, often pairing it with Behemoth as great creatures of the sea and land. Some traditions speak of Leviathan being served as food at the Messianic banquet, symbolizing the complete defeat of chaos in the age to come. So in the Messianic banquet, which we call the marriage supper of the Lamb, the Jews held the tradition that part of the feast would be to eat Leviathan, symbolizing the idea of you're eating it in defeat, and you would eat Leviathan. You're going to eat literally, his body, or whatever. And again, it's metaphoric, it's symbolic, but it's the idea of eating this creature is the idea of defeating the creature. And so that's where in Jewish tradition they held that that's where you would eat his body, is at the Messianic banquet. Early church writers, they went instantly to Satan on this one. They instantly to evil power. They saw it no other way. And so they all connected it with spiritual warfare and obviously divine victory. Now, in demonology, we're going one step further now. We just keep going down. It's layered. In demonology, a Leviathan is associated with the deadly sin of envy or corrosive jealousy, to possess what others have. He foments resentment that fosters comparison. And again, this is in demonology. By the way, Leviathan can be portrayed as both male and female, and he's associated with masculinized lesbianism, or butch. That's the common word to say it. Why is that? Leviathan is transgender. So, when you're looking at demonology, it's not a mistake when you find out that some of these gods and demons that people worshipped in the ancient world were transgender. They had both genders. Okay? Because it went against creation, it went against the order, and it doesn't shock me that in demonology that Leviathan can be both male and female. Right? And why would it be associated to masculinized lesbianism? It's weird, isn't it? Right? So anyway, that's a little bit of demonology. So at the end of the day, you have chaos and disorder, and you have evil and opposition to God. That's the big ticket items that he represents. And I think it's clear, and so the Bible doesn't state it specifically, but I think when you look at all the signs here, Leviathan is representative of Satan. There's no doubt about that. He's a power that you and I can't overcome. Only God can overcome him, right, through Christ. Only God can tame him. Only, God's Leviathan is like a toy in God's hands. That's how Satan would be to God, right? He's just a toy. And he, God has ultimate power, and he will destroy Leviathan. I can't see anything other than Satan in that. So I think that the water, the whole thing is connected to Satanism and demonology, obviously. So that's behind the words behind Leviathan and Behemoth. I know that went a little bit deeper than you want to, but I wanted you to know the whole background on that. Okay. Any questions before we take a break? Cool. Clear as mud. All right. We'll come back and do some current events afterwards. Okay, we're going to get going on current events. And we want to talk about tonight another blood libel that's raging through the culture, especially after the assassination of Charlie Kirk. And I want to kind of dispel a lot of things that are going on about that. Blood libels don't cease, and the problem what we got going on in the United States is we have a woke left and then we have a woke right, and that's forming. And the players on the woke right are anti-Semitic, and they're using Charlie's death as a way to capitalize on going anti-Israel. So it's getting bad. So anyway, what is a blood libel? Blood libel has to do with a ritual murder myth that was put on the Jews, obviously. Slander and lies are usually accompanying with that, and that's exactly what we got going on. If you look at the history of blood libels, lies, slanders, there's a pattern here. Whether going to Pharaoh, who said that Israel was a security threat, and then eventually smeared them and enslaved them and committed murder of the children of Israel, the boys. Or then you got Haman, who said the Jews were disloyal people, and there was an attempted genocide on them. Then you go through, the Middle Ages. First famous ritual case was William of Norwich. Then the Black Death, well poisoning libel was put on the Jews. Host desecration, deicide libels, that they were stealing the Eucharist from the church and desecrating that. Obviously, the pogroms and the Crusaders, they massacred them. Expulsions from England, France, Spain, all blood libels made up. Then Ottoman Empire did some ritual murder libels. Kishinev, a blood libel rumor, sparked mass violence. Belis in 1911 and 13 started the Tsarist era revivals. Kept going. Nazi era, Die Stürmer amplified ritual murder myths as part of the demonization. And then you had the Kelsey, 1946, post-war blood libel pogrom. And then 2009 to the day, they're saying that Israel organ harvests, blood drinking imagery still online. Israel controls the world. Israel controls the economy. Israel controls the United States and its president, which is, they're still saying that this week. Israel's apartheid state. Israel occupies. And now they're saying, this is what I want to go after today, is that they bullied Turning Point USA and Charlie Kirk to edit what they said about Israel, and that Israel was behind the assassination of Charlie Kirk, that's what's circulating. That's making the waves. Okay, so let's start off where all of this comes from. The source head of this lie is coming from what's called a website called Gray Zone. And I even saw that, conservative sources quoting Gray Zone, okay? Like Megyn Kelly, which should know better. Who should know better? Gray Zone is an anti-Semitic rag. It is far left, radical left. And it typically misleads in its reporting. So I cannot believe anyone would use this. But here's an example of how you read a lie, okay? Gray Zone. Charlie Kirk refused Netanyahu funding offer, was frightened by pro-Israel forces before death, friends reveal. Sources say, that's your first clue, okay? Sources say, longtime friend of Charlie Kirk. What friend? Who? What? Yeah, you got it? All right. Speaking on the condition of anonymity, because he doesn't want to let anyone know, that Charlie Kirk rejected an offer earlier this year from Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to arrange a massive new infusion of Zionist money. That's another clue right there. Zionist money into his Turning Point USA program or organization. They are literally saying that Netanyahu offered Charlie a bribe. Okay? Now, You think this is ridiculous. Hey, by the way, thousands of people are repeating this on social media. I have people bombarding me, asking me questions. Why is this happening? And why are the conservatives? They're pushing this narrative. So in the article, it said Kirk had come to loathe the Israeli leader, regarding him as a bully, the source said. Kirk was disgusted by what he witnessed inside the Trump administration, where Netanyahu sought to personally dictate the president's personal decision. Ain't nobody dictating anything to Trump, okay? Ain't nobody doing that. So right there, I can tell they're lying. No, that's ridiculous. Netanyahu's dictating? I don't think so. And weaponize Israeli assets like billionaire donor Miriam Adelson to keep the White House firmly under its thumb. Yeah, right. Okay. But yet, they're pushing this. Not the left, the right. According to Kirk's friend, so-called, who also enjoyed access to President Donald Trump, really, and his inner circle, oh, really? Kirk strongly warned Trump last June against bombing Iran on Israel's behalf. Really? Charlie was the only person who did that, they said, recalling how Trump barked at him in response and angrily shut down the conversation. Never heard of such a thing. The source believes the incident confirmed in Kirk's mind that the President of the United States had fallen under the control of the malign foreign power and was leading his own country into a series of disastrous conflicts. Can you see the lies? Okay? Okay, good. Here's more of it. This July at TPUSA Student Action Student Summit, Kirk provided a forum for right-wing grassroots to vent its fury about Israel's political hammerlock on Trump's administration. There, speakers from former Fox stalwarts Tucker Carlson, this is true, Megyn Kelly, this is true, to the anti-Zionist Jewish comedian Dave Smith, that's true. They were there, and they denounced Israel's blood-soaked assault on the besieged Gaza Strip, branded Jeffrey Epstein an Israeli intelligence asset, and openly taunted Zionist billionaires like Bill Ackman for getting away with scams despite having no actual skills. Now, that part is true. Tucker, Megyn Kelly, and Dave Smith went on there and said a lot of inflammatory things that they couldn't back up. And that became what we call the woke right. Tucker leads in that. Candace Owen leads in that. Okay? Anyway, according to Kirk's longtime friend, there's the friend again, we don't know who they are, Kirk's resentment of Netanyahu and Israel lobby was spreading within Trump's inner circle. In fact, they said the president himself was terrified of Netanyahu's wrath. Are you serious? And feared the consequences of defying him. Can you imagine Trump being afraid of anybody? It's hard to even buy. This is ridiculous. Okay, anyway, that's the article that became the source for Megyn Kelly and a lot of these people on the right and everybody on the internet pushing this junk. Okay? So then this came out, and look, Judge Andrew Napolitano should know better. But he interviewed a guy from Gray Zone. You can see the thing in the back on the left shoulder. It says the Gray Zone. This is where that article came from. And here's what they're saying. Zionist billionaire Bill Ackman hammered Charlie Kirk during the August intervention in the Hamptons for platforming critics of Israel at TPS USA events, Max Blumenthal reports. Max Blumenthal is the guy who wrote the article at Gray Matters, or Gray Zone, I should say. Okay? Ackman, according to multiple sources, had this meeting to basically bully Charlie Kirk into submission. Really? Charlie Kirk walked away, according to one person, feeling like there was an attempt to blackmail him. He refused an offer of funding and also refused to offer to travel to Israel and to meet with Netanyahu. So this is what I don't understand. This is, I think, Newsmax, I think that's Newsmax, and Judge Napolitano is interviewing this idiot that's making up these lies. I don't understand why you'd even give him credibility. Then another guy from InfoWars, okay, Harrison Smith. I'm not going to name names, but I was told by someone, there you go, close to Charlie Kirk, that Charlie thinks Israel will kill him if he turns against them. Okay. Listen to this doofus. Okay?
if you step on the landmine, you die, right? So that's how they act. I guess walking on eggshells would be a way of putting it, but more like walking through a minefield, of stepping on a landmine, of expressing something in not quite the correct way and having their lives destroyed for it. They're really carefully stepping around a bunch of bombs, and it's just sad and pathetic because they know the truth and they just won't say the truth. They're still operating in a system that will destroy you for becoming a threat to Israel. So how do they manage this? How do they walk this tightrope? Here's Charlie Kirk, again, trying to figure out how to dance in the minefield. Let's watch.
Look, I'm afraid because, again, I want civilization to win. I want the West to win. I don't want the Islamo-fascist barbarians to storm the gates of Jerusalem. But at the same time, simultaneously, when the hostile reaction is that now Meghan and Charlie are enemies,
right?
Boy, I'll tell you, like, you're not gonna, I wouldn't say lose, but you will weaken and just basically deflate two of your strongest advocates.
He's terrified. He literally started that clip by saying, "I am terrified." He's saying, "I'm terrified because I don't want the West to succumb to Islamo-fascism." Is that why he's terrified? Is that who's scaring him, the Islamo-fascists? Or is it the, Israeli donors to TPUSA who are probably frantic and freaking out right now and demanding that something be done to stop the bleeding? Something has to be done to cauterize this wound before we bleed out. They're real desperate to cauterize this wound, and they're leaning on Charlie Kirk, and Charlie Kirk is going, but the more I support Israel, the less legitimacy I have. I mean, they're in a lose-lose situation. They're in a downward spiral, and they're flipping out, and they don't know what to do with it. They don't know what to do about it. I have an answer for you. I have a solution, Charlie Kirk. Megyn Kelly, here's what you do. Tell them to go F themselves, and you tell the truth. You think you're going to lose, so you think it's going to be bad for you to break the shackles that are weighing you down? You're the golem. You're the golem, Charlie Kirk. Do you know how the golem story ends? They've created you. They've given you an incredibly powerful platform because you served their interests, and now they're threatening to take that platform away if you don't continue to serve their interests. They can't take the platform away, Charlie Kirk. It's yours.
So it's Israel that gave Charlie Kirk the platform, and it's Israel that's going to take the platform away from Charlie Kirk. That's insane. That's InfoWars, okay? That's insane. That's woke right. Okay, here's another part of the woke right, Candace Owens. Now, what I'm going to show you is already just a barrage of clips of her anti-Semitism, so you can kind of know the context before we get into actually what she starts saying about Charlie and Israel. So here we go. Here's the barrage.
It is shocking to me how when I'm not even trying to look into Israel, they pop up in everything. I think this is the reason why we don't get to open the Epstein files, we don't get to open the JFK files. Parking aside America, other countries too. You investigate anything. I mean, I'm investigating Brigitte Macron and Israeli blackmail comes up in Morocco. Everything that's being introduced by Zionists, right, and into our society, gambling, a major vice, drugs, prostitution, sex pornography. We Jews love pornography because we hate Catholics and we hate Jesus and allows us to crush the church. They want to make you guys think that this culture is okay, because then they can subjugate your culture. It was convenient for Israel, by the way, when the towers went down. It was just convenient for Israel that JFK got shot. They shot JFK in an open car, so there's not, he's a sitting president. Obviously my security doesn't really matter. If they want me, they're gonna get me. That's not a normal thought process to have. We don't have that about any other country in the world, except for the one that, took over ours, and that's the truth, okay? We are an occupied nation. This is a state that has a hexagram on their flag. Okay, they're even lying about the history of the Star of David. It's a hexagram. It's a cult. Killing Christians. You've always been killing Christians, and you've always been pointing the finger at Muslims. So everyone's awake to that now. But you got a little bit more than a PR problem, Bill Ackman. It is an occult nation. There's no question about that. Everything that they are involved in is occult. The leaders are coming together to find peace, right? Finally, everybody's coming to the table after 3 years of murdering young Ukrainian men. And I think we all recognize that the person that has the most power over all of our nations at this moment is Bibi Netanyahu. Of course, he's the boss. He's the big boss, Bibi. And he's going to decide when and if and exactly at what moment these wars are going to be allowed to end. Like, oh my gosh, we have to make sure that a Holocaust never happens. We have to support Israel. Nope. Now we are reading the books, we're learning about how you've executed this, you've blindfolded the entire world to what you are. And what I think you might be is possessed by a real demon. I'm Catholic, I believe in demons, and Netanyahu is very clearly a demon. And any person that supports him, like, you are a part of a totally demonic enterprise. I just want to be clear. Anything happens to me, blame the Zionists. 1,000% blame the Zionists. These characters are just being inserted into places to serve Israel. That makes Israel the master of the universe. And now, does all of this mean that Bibi Netanyahu and that this somehow proves that Israel was involved in the assassination of Charlie Kirk? No, we have no evidence of that. We can't say that because there is no evidence of that. But I don't like little lies. What happens in the Hamptons is not going to stay in the Hamptons, okay? Bring in our movie poster. I know what you did this summer.
She's crazy, man. I mean, she is lost a thread. But the problem is a lot of people are following her. Anyway, there's a couple things I'll show you before I get to the main videos. Charlie Kirk was fighting for some very powerful billionaires that he took money from over things he was discussing. The pressure on him was immense over the last 2 weeks. The truth will be revealed, the messages will be leaked, and the movement he built up will rise up. Again, she's just insinuating that these powerful billionaires were Jewish and they were controlling him and his platform. It's 100% true that Charlie opposed the war with Iran and was fighting with donors over Israel, as Tucker Carlson shared on Megyn Kelly's show. This is why I'm discomforted by the intentional lie by omission by Bibi told on Fox News about the letter Charlie wrote him. We have no way of verifying if Charlie ever said he opposed the war in Iran. I've never seen anything or that he was fighting donors over Israel. Here's what we do know about Candace. She had to quit as communications director. She quit before they fired her because she had so many complaints at Turning Point USA about her support of Hitler and the Holocaust, and said it was just not really happened, and it was overinflated, and just stupid things like that. So she had to quit before they fired her. Dennis Prager had to get rid of her at PragerU. He wrote a very condemning letter, and it was a fantastic letter to her, which was not answered, I believe. And then Candace Owens had to get out of the Daily Wire before Ben Shapiro fired her because of her anti-Semitic tropes of drinking and rabbis drinking Christian blood. This woman's crazy, man. Okay? Yeah, it is a debased mind. No doubt about that. She has recently converted to Catholicism in the last few years or whatever. Just to make a note, Catholicism teaches that they're the new Israel. Okay, so this is where replacement theology came from, out of Augustinianism, and why it's in Protestantism, because it's linked to the Catholic Church. This is Catechism of the Catholic Church, CCC 877. The Lord Jesus initiated the 12 as the seeds, quote, the seeds of the new Israel, and becoming of this and the beginning of the sacred hierarchy. And so again, right there, they believe they're the new Israel, like every cult does. And so when you see, that she would join the Catholic Church and push this narrative, it makes sense because they see themselves as a new Israel. She was also, I think, coming out trying to insinuate that Charlie was going to convert to Catholicism, and he was holding the rosary at the end. It's like, hey, I don't know where you're getting that, because his pastor is Rob McCoy right down south in Thousand Oaks. That's Calvary Chapel. That's not a Catholic church, so I don't know what you're talking about, Candace. Anyway, here's where the theory starts going deeper, okay? So I want you to go down the rabbit hole. It's ridiculous, but you need to know the talking points. I'm going to give you the talking points because you need to know how to defend this, because it's going on right now as a blood libel, okay? What she's going to say in this video is that people were contacting Charlie, and it's true that people were contacting Charlie after what happened in July at one of their Turning Points events, because they had Megyn Kelly and they had Dave Smith and they had Tucker, who went on the platform on their conference and just was saying the most off-the-wall stuff about Israel, that Epstein was part of the Mossad, And they were speculating on that, insinuating all this, and it was like the people that support Turning Point started complaining to Charlie, saying, "Why are you platforming these anti-Semites?" What she's going to spin it as is that the people complaining to Charlie was the Israeli government and Netanyahu, which is different than the people that support Charlie saying, because I said the same thing. Why did you platform Tucker? We know he's an anti-Semite. Why would you do that? And again, he got heat for that, right? But she's insinuating it's the Israeli government. So watch this.
Okay, I can tell you that. You're either going to take being kicked in the chest, okay, and told get out, and then suddenly they're all communicating behind your back, and just where he talks about that article, something goes out and suddenly it's like, what's going on? They're like trying to make you think you're going crazy because you're saying some sensible stuff. Charlie was at that moment. He says that he is receiving messages calling him an anti-Semite. So how can you lie right now and dispute it? And better question, why are you lying? I don't like little lies. I'm being contacted by a lot of people that are telling me at just within 48 hours before Charlie passed away, his top Jewish donors were pulling funding from him, demanding that Charlie take their name off of the building that they had donated to Turning Point. I guess I can figure out who that is, how many people could have donated a building. And then once Charlie was killed, they said, never mind, put it back on the building. Okay? Charlie himself had alluded to a tremendous loss of money coming in, and we'll speak about that more. More people are going to come out with information. This is all inevitable, okay? And I'll also point you in this direction. You guys remember Bibi recently was on a PR blitz, despite the fact that he was fighting this 96,000 front war because Israel didn't do nothing, okay? He was doing a ton of podcasts in America. He went on to Patrick Bet-David's podcast. He went on to Brandon Tatum's podcast. He went on to the Nelk Boys podcast. Anybody find it weird he didn't do Charlie Kirk's show? Homie very quickly told us that Charlie was penning love letters to him in May. I just love you so much. It's amazing. They were so close. The boys just hits him up like, hey, I know we're fighting this 97,000 front war because we're always the victims, but do you want to just come and maybe stay at my place for the weekend here in Israel? Like, that's the vibe that Bibi was rushing to present to the media. So why didn't he do Charlie Kirk's show? I'll leave that as a question for you guys. Common sense, okay? I don't like small lies. And remember, Bibi started this. I am responding to his shamelessness, shameless misrepresentation of what Charlie was going through and what Charlie was saying. Because, and I want to be clear, to me right now, it feels, and I'm using a corporate term here, a bit like a hostile takeover, okay? Charlie builds the company organically on the basis of Charlie and Charlie's honest ideas. Suddenly, that company's got a lot of money, and Charlie's honest ideas are starting to change or maybe add more color. And now he's getting financial threats. He's being called names. He increasingly, he's being told who and what he's allowed to speak to, and he's taking a stance. He's taking a stand privately up to these people, and then it doesn't matter anymore because Charlie's dead, and those very same people who were pressing him are now doing, like, very quickly, trying to set in stone that, Charlie, essentially, the energy is Charlie died for Israel. He's just one of us. Nobody ask any more questions. That is literally untrue, and we're not going to allow it, okay?
It's just crazy. So here's Megyn Kelly adding to this.
She went on to talk about, and this is the first I had heard this news, a meeting that Charlie had at the home of Bill Ackman in the Hamptons on October 5th. August 5th. With a bunch of influencers, as it was described by Bill Ackman later, some of whom he said were pro-Israel and some of whom he said maybe not so much. And there was a meeting at Bill Ackman's Hamptons home. Charlie was there. So were some other so-called influencers. And Candace suggests that at that meeting, Bill Ackman pressured Charlie, he was very supportive of Israel. Do not get me wrong. I mean, I know. I spoke with Charlie directly about this, but he was starting to have the same doubts, questions about whether this could continue without Israel losing all of its support in the world, as I was. And he and I had a long talk about our frustration at being dubbed anti-Zionist or anti-Israel or anti-Semites even, just for those very mild criticisms. I mean, my God, it was okay? It really was. And he was frustrated by that, and so was I. Now, Candace had a different characterization of that meeting than the one you're going to hear from Bill Ackman. And hers dovetails with this reporter, Max Blumenthal, who also reported on the meeting. Here is what she said, again, in part, in SOT 4, where she said they had this meeting, and she suggested that meeting with Bibi occurred while Charlie was at that meeting at Bill Ackman's house in the Hamptons.
A couple of weeks ago, before Charlie lost his life, Charlie was in the Hamptons, and he had more than one event, but he had essentially what was staged, an intervention was staged by Bill Ackman, because Charlie's thoughts, Charlie's rational thoughts about Israel were a no-no. This is not the route that you should be going on. And Charlie was surrounded by his friends, his quote-unquote friends. Bill Ackman was very upset, and threats were made. It was at this time that Bibi Netanyahu was called, and Charlie was invited to Israel. This was an under duress situation, I would say. And I know that Charlie was offered a ton of money in this moment. A ton of money. Bibi would fund it, you know, spend tons of money. And Turning Point, I guess, if it needed to go to a higher level, would have gone to an even higher level than it already was at. And I know for a fact that Charlie denied that funding, that Charlie denied, and what Bibi didn't include there, he declined to go to Israel.
She's insinuating that that Charlie Kirk, again, was going to take money or was offered a bribe from Netanyahu. That is just crazy, insane to think like that. In this other clip, I want you to listen to Megyn Kelly.
Oh, and by the way, I should mention, this is important. Andrew Colvett, who is Charlie's right-hand man at Turning Point, we know him well, wrote the following. I've been asked about this weekend event with Bill Ackman more than a few times now, so I asked our staff who were traveling with Charlie to find out what's true. His team was with him 100% of the time when he was not in his hotel room. Here's what they told me. Bill never yelled at Charlie, never pressed him on Bibi, never gave him a list of Charlie's offenses against Israel. There was concern raised about having Tucker at the Student Action Summit. We don't believe this came from Bill. And Charlie's reply was, honestly, people telling me not to have Tucker makes me want to have Tucker. And I am going to lock him in for AmFest, too. Charlie personally told me, says Andrew, he had a very cordial relationship with Bill, and the event was productive. Those are the facts.
So that's Charlie's right-hand man saying, we were at the Hamptons, and what Candace is saying is not true. This is what happened. This is what was said. There was some concern about Tucker being there, but that's about it. There was no bribing anybody, right? It's Bill Ackman. It was at his house that this happened. And I think he's a multi-millionaire or billionaire, I think he might be. But anyway, New York Post had this, and he shared his text messages with Charlie and says, you know, Candace Owens is crazy, man. She's claiming blackmail. Here's what Bill Ackman says. A few facts, corrections, receipts to dispel some misinformation going on social media. The TP USA Hamptons event was not held at my house, but rather at a hotel in Bridgehampton. As I previously explained, I did cover the cost of the event, travel, food, lodging, participant. This was not a secret event, and no one signed an NDA, a non-disclosure form type thing. Everyone, including the Turning Point representatives who attended, are totally free to share whatever they want to about what took place and was discussed. This was not a Catham House Rules event. Some of them have already publicly shared their experience and perspectives on the convening. In the spirit of transparency, I encourage any of the other attendees that have not already shared their thoughts on the event to do so. That said, I understand why some may not want to do so because of their fear of getting attacked by the mob who assume that something untoward took place. I am sure there are some Israeli supporters of TPS USA who became upset with Charlie because he told me so. He complained to me that some pro-Israel advocates view any criticism of Israel as anti-Semitic, and we both agree that that is wrong. I did not complain to Charlie about Tucker Carlson's criticism of me at TPS USA. I did ask him why he thought Tucker attacked me, and he told me why, and he did not know why. He told me that he thought my statement in response to Tucker was a great one. It can be found here. Anyway, as Bill Ackman is showing, he's like, if you want to know what happened at this meeting, this gathering, ask any of the people that went there. Okay? There's people there that are witnesses that we didn't corner Charlie, we didn't pressure him and bully him and then get him on the phone with Netanyahu and try to bribe him. That's not what's went down. But that's what Candace Owens is trying to get across. Here's Ackman's text to Charlie the next day. How are you? How are you? I'm doing great. Really enjoyed the time together last night. Thank you again for doing that. It was great and great to get you to know you better. We should do dinner sometime with the ladies. Absolutely, that would be awesome. Let me know when you would be in New York City. We'll have you over. Thank you. There are a few times this fall. Great. Just let me know. Doesn't sound like somebody that was bullied. Okay? So it's starting a problem here. And as you can see with any common sense, there's nothing here. Yes, Charlie got complaints by people who didn't like Tucker, didn't like what Megyn Kelly said, didn't like what that comedian Dave Smith said. But Israel's government was threatening him? What are you talking about, man?
Well, here is the reason I am weighing in. I wasn't there, and I don't know what happened. But the day Charlie was done with that summit at Ackman's house, he came on my show. It was his last appearance on the Megyn Kelly show on August 6th. And I asked him about his evolving views on Israel and about the criticism we both had come under for, honestly, like the most milquetoast criticisms of Israel. It was just crazy. I don't think Charlie actually even really did criticize Israel. I think he just hosted his Turning Point event in July, in which he had tons of pro-Israel people, tons. But also Dave Smith was there, who's a critic, and Tucker was there, who's become a bit of a critic. And he got so much for this. And Charlie was really frustrated by this and annoyed because no young person, no person under 30 in America supports Israel. They just don't. Look at the polls. It doesn't matter whether you're conservative or not, like virtually none of them. And that was Charlie's constituency. And Charlie was hearing from those people that they were not into this and they really weren't into our support for the war in Iran and bombing Iran and all that. And he was trying to find a way of bringing that to President Trump and bringing that to his donors and to everybody else to say, hey, you know, you might be losing some support here. I said the same, and both of us got treated like we are Mehdi Hassan, and we were annoyed. We were both annoyed by that.
Well, Kelly, or Megan, I should say, you were called that because you insinuated that Jeffrey Epstein worked for the Mossad. When you say stupid things like that, expect people to call you that, because you had no basis to say that. You have no evidence, no facts, and you put Jeffrey Epstein in that category. And not that Jeffrey Epstein's, you know, a wonderful guy, but you indicted Israel by him. That's what you did, and that's why the supporters of TPUSA got so ticked off at Megyn Kelly and Charlie Kirk for bringing her on that platform and allowing her to say that. Now, here's a picture of Charlie Kirk, and Candace said that Charlie Kirk hated Netanyahu. Okay? But listen to this clip.
We've been on the move. We were in Israel a couple weeks ago for the embassy opening.
We went out with Huckabee about 4 or 5 years ago.
Is it not the most amazing place?
I never been. And we had like an hour with Netanyahu.
He's special.
Yes.
He's a special leader.
You know why it says?
Oh, and he's everything a leader should be, right? I mean, just confident and
Everything
direct.
Barack wasn't.
He's special. He's everything a leader should be. And Candace Owens says, oh, he hated him. They were bribing him. And, hey, man, we're getting 2 messages here. That's out of Charlie Kirk's mouth right there. Let's go back to Tucker, why he ticked so many people off at TPUSA in July. He was saying, why is our foreign policy being ran by Israel? That was insinuation, or he actually said that, I'm sorry. That America is just inciting Islam and the world's hatred for the West because we support Israel, and this doesn't help America. That's what Tucker said. That's why people complained to Charlie about this. This is why they said, look, don't keep putting this rabid anti-Semite on your platform, or we'll probably pull funding if you continue. That's probably what was happening. It wasn't the Israeli government. It was people that are pro-Israel. Tucker claimed that Epstein was employed by Israeli intelligence service, the Mossad, and he had no facts whatsoever. None. None to say that. And again, it's not that this is Tucker's first time of going anti-Israel. He has a history now that he's rabidly anti-Semitic and anti-Israel. He has proven that. So people know this. People know this, okay? Listen to Tucker. It's nonsense. And this is not at TPUSA, but this is him talking after Charlie has been shot about, supposedly what him and Charlie said.
And I said, probably not going to talk about that. I'm not going to torture you. I know your donors hate this when I say that. And also Epstein was in the news, and it was clear to me that, Epstein's probably not like a Mossad agent or something, but Epstein clearly had contact with Israeli intelligence and American intelligence and French intelligence, but the only one you're not allowed to talk about is Israeli intelligence. But it seemed true to me, and I had done some work on that. And I knew a bunch of people pretty close to that story, so I thought that. And I said that to Charlie, and I said, but I'm not going to say that because I don't want to make your donors mad. I know it's just going to be like an endless flurry of text telling you to stop or you're going to lose a bunch of funding. And he looked at me, I'll never forget it, and said, go all the way. Do it. Go all the way. I said, man, a lot of things I can talk about. I don't need to talk about that. And he said, do it. So I did it. And by the way, I think that conversation, he had a mic on, and so did I, probably exists somewhere on somebody's server, but that's, I think, a faithful rendition of what he said. And by the way, I'm not trying to blame him for my remarks. You can agree or disagree with those remarks, but I'm saying this only because I was shocked and sickened by the reaction of the ghoulish and really repulsive reaction of the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, to Charlie's death. Basically made it all about him and all about his country, immediately trying to take the energy, the sadness, the grief that people felt over Charlie's murder and redirect it towards support for whatever project he's involved in. And by the way, Benjamin Netanyahu is not the same as the nation of Israel at all. Bibi is despised by many people in Israel, and if you know people who live there, you know that that's true. There are huge divisions within the Israeli government. I mean, there are certain parts of the intel world in Israel that do not support some things that Benjamin Netanyahu has done recently. So it's not the same as attacking Israel, attacking Bibi, but I don't think I've ever seen anything lower than his attempt to hijack Charlie's memory and use it for his own political ends, particularly because what he said was completely untrue. Charlie didn't hate Jews. He loved Jews. He had tons of friends who were Jews. He loved the state of Israel. He loved going there. He did not like Bibi Netanyahu, and he said that to me many times, and he said it to people around him many times. He felt that Bibi Netanyahu was a very destructive force. He was appalled by what was happening in Gaza. He was, above all, resentful that he believed Netanyahu was using the United States to prosecute his wars for the benefit of his country, and that it was shameful and embarrassing and bad for the United States, and he resented it. Didn't hate Netanyahu. He wasn't out there with a placard saying that, but he certainly expressed that to me and a lot of other people. And there's no question that Bibi's defenders on the internet will call me a liar or a kook, but that's a fact. And enough text messages exist that I think it can probably be verified in pretty short order. Not that it needs to be, because that is true. Shortly after that speech, there was a very intense attack on Charlie, and to some extent on me, not that I really noticed. But on him, I have no donors. He had $100 million worth of donors. And so, because he was involved in a different project from just yapping on the internet, which is what I do for a living, he was dependent to a great extent on his donors, of course. It's a nonprofit. And they went after him and tormented him. Not all, of course, many were supportive, but the ones who were offended by my speech, and there was a small, very intense group who were, tormented Charlie Kirk until the day he died. 2 days before he died, he lost a $2 million donation because he had publicly pledged to bring me to the next Turning Point conference in December. And he told me over the past couple of months he was losing a lot of donations over that pledge. They put out a flyer basically saying that I was going to be at this event giving a speech. And so he would text me and say, man, I'm really taking a lot of heat for this, and people are really mad. The American Jewish Committee called in a statement Charlie Kirk an anti-Semite and, quote, dangerous. Charlie Kirk, an anti-Semite. Yeah. He was not an anti-Semite. He was the opposite, and he was not dangerous. He was a great lover of people and a purveyor of peace. He was the opposite. And he was very stung by that. Those of us who've been called names for a long time are a little bit harder to offend. Charlie was deeply offended by that and expressed some of those feelings on Megyn Kelly's show and in other places. But that did not let up. The reason I'm telling this story is because he called me and then came to see me at my house about this topic. And I said to him every single time, look, I've got my own way to communicate my views. This is actually not the most important issue to me. There are lots of things I can talk about. I don't need to come to Turning Point. I can take a year off, no problem. I hated seeing how much he was suffering, the hassle he was getting from people, and I was being attacked too. By the way, it was a huge effort. I wasn't fully aware of it, actually, because I don't go online that much. But there was a huge effort by people, some of whom I know and have helped, and like Seth Dillon of the Babylon Bee, for example. Someone who had his own problems with free speech, who was famously canceled. And I like Seth Dillon. I had him on a couple of times. I had dinner with him to show support. Seth Dillon was out there demanding that Charlie Kirk take me off the roster, pull me off stage, because I had said things that Bibi didn't like or that he didn't like or whatever. Shocking that someone whose whole persona is wrapped up in the idea that we all get to speak, and if you don't like it, make a more compelling case, that person and many others like him were advocating for me getting pulled off the stage because they don't like what I'm saying. This is a trend, and one that we should be really concerned about. It's not just about Israel, by the way, at all. The trend is really simple. People with power don't want to hear disagreement. They don't want to be challenged, ever. That's why we have free speech, to acknowledge that even those of us or people with less power still have a right to talk because they're human beings. You don't own them. So time after time, Charlie would call me or come to see me and let me know, wow, or show me text messages. These people are really mad that you're speaking. And I would always have the same thought, well, like, I feel pretty moderate, actually. I've never been an Israel hater. Obviously, I'm not an anti-Semite. I just don't want more wars, and I don't want a foreign country humiliating my country and telling us what our laws have to be. I mean, this seems like pretty basic America First stuff, and he would say, I totally agree with you, but they want you off the stage. And I would always say, no problem. And he would say, no, it's important. It's a matter of principle. I want you to be there. Great. By the way, I'm not accusing anyone of being involved in that murder. I'm not trying to mutter darkly or imply anything. There's a lot we don't know about who murdered Charlie and why, but I don't know, and I'm not going to pretend that I do. But I think it's important to say that out loud, because it's a fact, and there are many liars out there trying, Bibi Netanyahu, number one among them, shamefully, who are trying to distort the truth, a truth that I know and can prove.
Well, the problem with Tucker, you have a long history of anti-Semitism, and just produce the text messages. Just produce it. You're talking, I talked to Charlie, you can say that all day long, but it doesn't mean anything. Because if you can't prove the conversation you had, and I don't believe you, because you don't have the track record. You hate Israel, you're anti-Semitic. And here's the thing, Tucker, it's not about free speech. If we're platforming somebody on our conservative platform, you've got to check the boxes, Tucker. Okay? Otherwise, you don't get platformed. If you're anti-abortion, you're for abortion, you're pro-abortion, you're not going to get on a conservative platform, Tucker, you idiot. It's a box check. It's not a free speech venue. It's a conservative venue. And therefore, since it's conservative, here are the boxes you must check. And one of them is pro-Israel, not anti-Israel. So when Charlie, which I believe made a huge mistake by putting Tucker on there and Megyn Kelly and Dave Smith, they don't check the boxes. Now, if you wanted to have a debate or whatever, then that's a whole different venue. But the venue of TPUSA was conservatism, which means if Tucker, let's take another issue, believed in gay marriage, that's not one of the boxes you can check, Tucker. You can't be on stage if you're pro, gay marriage or whatever. I'm for abortion or I'm for transgenderism. Okay, then you don't check the boxes, Tucker. That's the point that the people at TPUSA that support Charlie were trying to tell Charlie. These guys don't check the box. And pro-Israel is one of the boxes. If you don't like it, Tucker, I don't know what your problem is. It wasn't going to Oxford and debating with people. So prove it then. Prove that Charlie said that. Because Candace says the same thing, and we know her track record. Here's Megyn Kelly. I was outraged at what she said. I'm convinced he wasn't one of ours, talking about Jeffrey Epstein. Charlie, so he was an American who leads to basically three options. He's M16, Saudi, or Mossad. Which one would you choose? She said Mossad, given his connections to Ghislaine Maxwell. Just because of Ghislaine Maxwell, you're going to connect him to the Mossad. That's the reason everything is getting buried. Charlie, I have no evidence to suggest that. No, me either. Then why say it? If you have no evidence, you don't say it. That's the problem with the woke right. Then you have Wikipedia-educated comedian Dave Smith get up there and bashes Israel. Dave Smith says that the relationship between America and Israel has been a disaster for American people. Really? What are you talking about? No wonder people are mad. This relationship has caused an inherent worldwide hatred, is at the core of why terrorists hate our guts and why we have to fight wars with Muslims. That's not the reason. It's because the Muslims are crazy. Because they believe in a crazy religion called Islam. Dave, it's not because of Israel, our love for Israel. It's our money, our weapons, and our intelligence that allows Israel to do what they do in Gaza. What are they doing, Gaza? What are they doing, Dave? What are they doing? Genocide? Is that what you're getting ready? That's why people who supported Charlie Kirk said, get these creeps off your platform or we're pulling the funding. I don't blame them. When you say stupid things off the wall, like Megyn Kelly did, Tucker Carlson, and this idiot, no wonder they're pulling millions of dollars from Charlie. And Charlie should have learned his lesson. Netanyahu obviously rejects insane conspiracy theories. Israel's behind Charlie Kirk's assassination. Here's Greta on Newsmax with Netanyahu.
Before I let you go, I want you to address one thing, it's just the absurdity of it. Some of the internet rumors that somehow Israel is behind the Charlie Kirk murder, and I don't believe it for 1 second, but I want you to make a statement. It's so absurd.
That's insane. That's insane. Israel also changes the orbit of the moon. Israel pushes the sun. I mean, the whole thing it's not only insane, I think it's so absurd, so stupid, and so ridiculous. You can't believe that people are saying this. They just found the perpetrator. They'll get to the bottom of this. But they go, they have no limits. When you hate Jews, when you hate the Jewish state, you're willing to say anything and promote all these absurd rumors. And by the way, they're willing to kill us all the time. I mean, that's what they're doing. And over the centuries, when Jews, especially in the Middle Ages, the horrific Middle Ages, the worst things were said about Jews you couldn't possibly believe. We were poisoning the wells. We were drinking the blood of Christian children. You name it. I mean, these things, that continued actually up to the Holocaust. The Nazis said the same thing. You know, we're carrying vermin, we're spreading disease. And people believed it. And every time they believed it, this was a prelude to a greater and greater massacre, culminating with the worst massacre of them all, the Holocaust.
Yeah, and he's right. If you keep telling lies like this, and now it's on the political right, that Israel shot Charlie, or they were behind it, and they were pressuring Charlie, there's people out there that are dumb enough to believe this. You're smart enough, you saw what they said, it's ridiculous, you saw the articles, and you look at that, that's all a bunch of lies. Yeah, I know, but most people can't discern that. Fleur Hassan Naham out of Israel said this: what does it say about the West when so many react to a political murder by blaming the Mossad and cheering for the death of a Christian Zionist? What does it say? It says we have a problem. We have a huge anti-Semitic problem. I'm just going to briefly talk about this, and then I got to move on because we're running out of time. But here, instead of focusing on Israel, you know what we should be focusing on? Operation Arctic Frost. That's what we should be focused. What happened? Biden FBI was investigated Charlie Kirk's Turning Point USA and other Republican groups. The FBI targeted 92 Republican organizations as part of its witch hunt investigation against Trump. That's what just came out. That actually should be in the news instead of this nonsense that Israel somehow was behind Charlie Kirk's death. Here's the papers that the FBI released. Kash Patel released them, and he talked about that, I think today or yesterday. I can't remember. I don't have time to show it. But anyway, you can look that up. That's actually what should people be following. But let me talk about this real quick. Insinuations. That's what Megyn Kelly, that's what Dave Smith, that's what Tucker are doing. I'm just asking questions. That's a shield for an accusation. A question like that implies a guilt without evidence. It's an insinuation. Speculation without facts breeds conspiracy theories. Connecting dots by guesswork. Correlation does not mean causation. That creates false narratives and that damages people. That's what those three people are doing and the woke right is doing. And how insinuation works. There's loaded questions that smuggle an accusation. I'm not saying they did, but don't you think evidence-free speculation framed as, I'm just exploring possibilities, or dot connecting that forces unrelated events and people into a storyline. Benjamin Netanyahu called Charlie at Bill Ackman's house and told him, you better stay the course or else. What? Anonymous inside information, right? That's what they had. What does the scripture say? Hold your conclusion until you have 2 or 3 witnesses. Refuse to platform rumors. What I'm suggesting to you, if this continues, it's not put down, it's going to continue to break Israel away from the United States. If people start getting more and more anti-Semitic. And look, what does scripture say? Israel will be isolated by themselves, according to Zechariah 12. I will make Jerusalem a cup of drunkenness to all surrounding people when they lay siege against Judah and Jerusalem. And it shall happen in that day, I will make Jerusalem a very heavy stone for all peoples. All who would heave it away will surely be cut in pieces. Though all nations, what does all mean? All, including the United States, of the earth are gathered against it. That's what we're starting to see. And eventually, all the nations coming against Israel, what is it going to do? Push them right into the hands of the Antichrist, because the Antichrist will con them and he will be pro-Israel. He will be the only one that's pro-Israel. I got your back. I'll take care of you. Come on in. I'm your new Messiah. Dude, that's where it's heading. So what can you and I do? We have to dispel these blood libels. We have to tell other Christians who are getting caught up on this, saying, that's all a lie, that's not right, this is what the facts are. Candace and Tucker are making things up. They don't have the facts behind them. They're getting their information from an a far radical left newspaper. That's where they're getting their information from. And they're insinuating things. And so that's our job. That's what we got to do. That's how we have to fight blood libels. And again, it's out there. It's getting traction. And again, why does blood libels work so well? Because it reveals the heart of the individual anyway. They want to scapegoat somebody. They want to blame the Jews. And that's been the course of history all since Israel has existed. That's why it's happening right now. So we need to do our job, okay? So make sure we get the truth out there, okay? We got to get running. Let's pray. Father, thank you, Lord, for what we can learn tonight about the Hebraisms, and Father, especially about this new lies that are coming out, even on the political right. Help us, Father, take our stand for the truth. Help us to disseminate that information out there and correct things in a loving, respectful way so that, Father, that people are not deceived. Bless us as we go now. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, Ron, what do we got to do? Take out the tables and bring in the rounds for iron sharpens iron. All right, thank you.